Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to learn how to make this trendy A-line dress with a snatch waistline and a built-up collar. Now for this dress we're going to be drafting both the front and the back together. So as you all can see, I have marked my start line, and then from that start line I came down by the chest line, which is going to serve for both the chest and bust line, the waistline, the hip line, and then the full length of the dress, which I'm going to be using the full length of the material for it. After that, I marked it a second time, and then I went ahead to connect all the lines with a ruler. So this is the chest, the waist, and the hip. Now, as you all can see, I folded this material in four, which is for the front and back. I'm drafting on the closed folded side, while the open side is on the other side. Now, on the start line, I came in by 3 inches, and I came down as well by 1 inch, and then I connected both points together to form my back armhole, my back neckline. Then on the start line again, I came in by half of the shoulder measurements plus half an inch allowance, and I marked that down. And then on the chest line, I came in by the same measurements and I marked it down as well. So I'll go ahead and connect these 2 points together. After that, on the chest line, I came in by quarter of the bust measurements. I'll mark that down, and then I'll add half an inch as well for allowance. Then I went ahead to find the midpoint of this line we drew. On the midpoint, I will come in by half an inch, and then from the half an inch, I will connect the 3 points all the way to the start line to form the front armhole. After that again, I would also connect the points again to the middle of the line to form the back armhole. Now as you all can see, there are two armholes here. After that, on the shoulder line, I came down by half an inch, and then I connected it to the neckline to form the shoulder slope. And then from that shoulder slope, I came up again by half an inch just for shoulder joining allowance. Now that we're done with that, it's time for us to mark our round body measurement. So on the chest line, I'll mark quarter of the bust measurement plus 1 inch for ease and 1.5 inch for sewing allowance. On the waistline as well, I'll mark quarter of the waist measurement plus 1 inch for ease and 1.5 inch sewing allowance. On the hip line, I would also mark quarter of the hip measurement plus 1 inch for ease and 1.5 inch sewing allowance. And then on the end of the dress, the same thing that we have on the hip line, I went ahead to mark it there, but then I added extra 2 inches just to make it an A-line shape. Now I'll go ahead and connect all these points together. And after that, I'm going to cut out the dress. Now, if you all can see, what I cut out was just for the back of the dress. So I'm going to remove out one for the back, and then I'll continue cutting for the front. Now, the first thing I went ahead to do was to cut out the armhole for the front, following this line that I've already drawn. And after cutting out the armhole, the next thing is to determine the space for the built-up collar that we are adding. So since this dress is on a fold, I want the built-up collar to be 3 inches. But since this dress is on a fold, we are going to be marking 1.5 inch all the way from the chest line to the end of the dress. And then after marking that, I went ahead to connect all the points together. Now that I was done connecting, the next thing I also did was to add sewing allowance for the collar on the dress. So for that, I came in by half an inch from the line that we drew, all the way again from the chest line to the end of the dress, and then I connected them together. Now, another thing you should take note of is where you want the V neckline, the opening of your neckline to begin from. So I want the opening on the neckline to begin from at least 7 inches. So from the start line, I marked 7 inches and then I extended the line I drew to that 7 inches. So we're going to be cutting from 7 inches. But then from that 7 inches as well, you would as well connect it to your neckline. And after connecting it, you will cut all the way from the neckline to the end of your dress. Now, after cutting it out, I'm just going to keep this aside. We are done with the front. Now it's time for us to draft the sleeve. For the sleeve, I'm going to be cutting both of the sleeves together. As you can see, I folded it into 4. So I started by drafting my start line. And then from that start line, I came down by the bicep line. I connected it on both sides and just rolled it down. And then the next thing we're going to mark is the full length of our sleeve. So this sleeve is a bell sleeve, and for a bell sleeve, you just need your bicep line and the full length. So while marking the full length, I also took note of the sewing allowance for the sleeve. Now to draft the armhole for the sleeve, on the dress, we're going to mark from the start line all the way to the end of the armhole. And after getting the measurements, we would use that to mark that on the bicep line. So whatever you get, you are going to mark exactly that on your bicep line. Now after marking that, we're going to connect from that point all the way to the front of the start line, as you all can see. And then would locate the midpoint of the line that we just drew and mark that down. Now the next thing we're going to do is following the fuller part of the curve, we'll start by drafting the first armhole to connect the midpoint of the line, and using the fuller part again, we'll connect from the midpoint to the end of the mark that we did. Now after that, I went ahead to measure the armhole that I just created. It has to be the same measurements with the armhole that we measured on the dress. So I noticed mine was bigger, so I just went ahead to mark where it stopped. Now the next thing we're going to do is to mark the measurement on the full length of the sleeve. So this bell sleeve is just like drafting an A-line sleeve. So what I went ahead to do was I marked what I have on the bicep on the full length, and then I came in again by 2.5 inch, just because that's where my material stopped. But for this, you can use either 2 inches or 3 or 4, depending on how wide you want your bell sleeve to be. And then the next thing I went ahead to do was to come up from the armhole by 0.5 inch, which is going to serve as sewing allowance for the armhole. And then I went ahead to cut out the sleeve. Now after that, I placed the front and the back pieces right sides facing each other, and then I'll go ahead and sew the shoulders together. So I'm done sewing the shoulders together, and the next thing we're going to do is to attach our built-up neckline. So for that, you need to measure all the way from the cutout round the back neckline down again to the end of your cutout. But if you don't want to do that, you can just measure from one side of the cutout that you made all the way to half of your back neckline. And then whatever you get, you just multiply it by 2 and use that to cut your collar. So after measuring, I used the what I got to cut out my collar, but I added 2 inches more to my measurements just to make sure I don't have any shortage in this collar. So this is the collar. On a fold, our collar is 2 inches wide, which is 1.5 inch plus half-inch sewing allowance. And as you all can see, I have ironed a paper slit to it. As for the midpoint of the collar, I notched that as well, just to know where to attach it to the back. Now on the dress, I went ahead to measure where I want the opening of my neckline to stop. So I want it to be 7 inches deep. So I measured 7 inches. As for the back of the neckline, I just measured half of it. So connecting half of the back neckline plus our 7 inches, I'm going to use that to mark the opening of our collar. Now on the collar, I went ahead to open it to the wrong side. While opening, I was also mindful of the notch that I made. So I'm going to use a pin just to secure the notch down. Now after pinning from the top of the fold, I came down by what we got, that's the 7 inches plus the half of the neckline, and then from that mark all the way down to the end of the collar, I went ahead to measure it, to sew it down. And after sewing it down, I'll just open the collar back to the right side, and now it's time to attach it to the dress. So I brought back our dress, and on the back neckline, I've also notched the midpoints as well. So placing both midpoints to midpoints, that's the collar and the dress, I'll pin it down, and then I'll go ahead and sew from one midpoint all the way to the end of one side of the dress. And after sewing that, I would also do the same thing from the midpoint all the way to the other side of the dress. Now I'm done sewing, and this is what we have. Another thing I went ahead to do was to cut out any excesses that was left on the collar. Now it's time for us to attach sleeves to the dress. So I opened up the dress, and then using the sleeve that we cut, I'm going to place it right sides facing the dress, midpoint to midpoint, and then we're going to sew it all around. Now I'm done sewing the sleeves, as you all can see. I also did the same thing for the other side. Another thing I went ahead to do, which I should have done while cutting, was on the sides of the dress, I went ahead to curve it to the full length by coming up by 1.5 inch and cutting it out. So on both sides of the sleeve, I also did the same thing as well, just to make sure that it's not entirely straight and it's a bit curvy. So these are the loops for the dress. The loops are 4 inches long, and for the width it is 2 inches wide. So for the folding of the loop, I just like folded it on both sides, folded it again, and went ahead to sew on it. So I cut out 6 loops in total, and when it is on a fold, it's 2 inches wide, which is 1 inch for sewing allowance and 1 inch for the loop hole. So for the rope of the loop is also 2 inches wide. It is also folded the same way that we fold the loop. And for the length of the rope, I just used my waist measurements, my client's waist measurements times 3. Now to attach the loops, I went ahead to locate the waist point, and then from that waist point, I came up and down by 1 inch, and I marked that down. Now after marking it down, we're going to attach the loops on those marks that we made. So for attaching, I'm going to fold the loop into 2, and then I'm just going to place it in between the front and the back, exactly at the marks that we made. Now I'm done attaching the loops, as you all can see. So the same way I attached it here, I'm also going to do it on the other side of the dress. So the next thing I went ahead to do was to pin both armhole together, both waistline together, and length of dress, I pinned it together as well. And after that, starting from the sleeve, I'm going to sew the dress down using the 1 inch allowance that we added. So the same thing, I'm going to do it for the other side. Now I'm done sewing the dress together, and this is what we have. As you all can see, our loops are sitting pretty. As for the end of the dress, I've gone ahead to hem it, and the end of the sleeve, I've also hemmed it as well. Now, another thing I went ahead to do was on the wrong side of the dress, I went ahead to fold the raw edges together. Now, this is because I'm not going to weave this dress. So how I did that was the same way we hem our dress, you will just fold it once, fold it again, and sew on it. But for this folding, I used just 1/2 inch sewing allowance, and that was it. Now for fixing of the rope, you are going to start by fixing it on the first set of loops, And after that, you go ahead and check the length of your rope to make sure that it is equal on both sides. Then when you are done with that, you go ahead and start fixing your loops on your rope on the other loops, but this time on a opposite direction, just as you all can see me doing. And when you are done, you will go ahead and tie your rope. So as you fix your rope, your waist would also be getting snatched. So that is what gives this dress that snatched effect. Now we've come to the end of our tutorial for this dress. If you all found my video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment if you have a question or observation. You can as well subscribe to my channel to encourage me to bring more of these videos to you all, and turn up your notification bell, and as well share this to bless others. Thank you.